Hey everybody, welcome to Engage on UMFM 101.5. This week we are back with James and Rebecca from Winnipeg Police Cause Harm. Winnipeg Police Cause Harm is a local Winnipeg group that's focused on advocating against police violence, police corruption, and ultimately looking to reallocate the police budget into some more sustainable and better routes to help our community. So we're really excited to have a conversation with them. So I guess you guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves and a little bit about your roles.
Sure, I'm James. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of Winnipeg Police Cause Harm. I'm also a student at the University of Manitoba, so it's great to be able to do this. I've been organizing with the group since around late 2019.
Hey, my name is Rebecca. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a white cis settler and organizer with WPCH. I have since about the middle of the last summer, so summer 2020.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming today. We're excited to have this conversation. I guess first off, we can start with what is Winnipeg Police Cause Harm? What do you guys do in the community?
Yeah, so kind of just, being more specific to the intro that you provided. Winnipeg Police Cause Harm is a community-centered police abolitionist group committed to defunding the Winnipeg Police Service and reallocating resources to life-sustaining services. In terms of what we do a pretty wide range of activities and organizing. And so this includes, but certainly is not limited to, providing commentary and analysis of mainly Winnipeg-centered happenings on social media. We frequently send delegations to City Hall and to police board meetings. This kind of organizing has successfully halted a proposal for body-worn cameras earlier this year. We run fundraisers and mutual aid initiatives with families affected by police violence. We respond to media requests, and we actually run our own blog on our website, winnipegpolicecauseharm.org. We frequently do postering and awareness raising education campaigns around specific issues like the police helicopter, and we occasionally run workshops like one we did with Anishinaabe lawyer Danielle Morrison. From that workshop, we actually developed Know Your Rights cards, which we also distribute at different outreach events we attend. James, if there's anything I missed, feel free to jump in.
No, I mean, I think that was a really good overview. I would just say very generally, we're trying to fill a gap that we perceive to exist within the political discourse in Winnipeg when it comes to just challenging police narratives, which often go unchallenged. And so there's been a lot of other groups that have done this work previous to us. So we're just trying to pick up some of that and carry the momentum forward as police continue to escalate and entrench their powers.
Okay, and for you both individually, would you want to touch on, personally speaking, what this work means to you, why you became involved with the organization and such?
Yeah, for sure. I can start if it's okay. As Rebecca is, I'm also a white settler, and so living in Winnipeg for a number of years and just learning of the level of violence and just like daily atrocities committed by the Winnipeg police really compelled me to want to do something with that knowledge rather than just individually complain about it on social media, as important as that can be. So the group formed in 2019 after a series of quite visible police killings, including Chad William and Macho Amadou and Sean Thompson and Randy Cochran. 2019 was just a very violent year when it came to police killings. And so the group formed out of that and out of the knowledge that we need to do something about that. Following the work of organizations like Cop Watch, which existed in Winnipeg about a decade ago, and then also Bar None, which is an organization that organizes a ride share for incarcerated or family members of incarcerated people in Manitoba. And so sort of following that work, we just wanted to continue to politicize it. And so for me personally, it's just having a feeling that we can collectively struggle against these conditions because, obviously the police is such a powerful and violent organization that monopolizes so much of the municipal budget. And it does feel very overwhelming to even think about this individually, but also knowing that as a white settler, that I have a privilege to be able to speak out and to challenge these kind of things. Like, for example, being able to sit in a Winnipeg Police Board meeting across from the police chief and to challenge police narratives is certainly not something that that Indigenous or Black people may want to put themselves into the position of, just because the stakes are so much higher when it comes to retaliation and violence. And so just like all those things kind of combining and just feeling like I wanted to do something collective and to engage in collective struggle, I think is what has really brought this group together and continues to propel it forward.
Yeah, and so kind of building on that and adding some of my experience. So I grew up in so-called Winnipeg, and my maternal ancestors settled in Treaty 4 territory and near the eastern border of Treaty 1. I have just finished my master's last year, and so in pursuing this education, I studied settler colonialism, and my thesis worked to kind of conceptually disrupt this fraught notion of reconciliation. And so kind of moving back to Winnipeg, finding my way, learning how to live on these lands that I occupy and continue to settle on in a good way has kind of what brought me to organizing. You know, in April 2020, when the Winnipeg Police Service murdered Jason Collins, Stuart Andrews, and 16-year-old Aisha Hudson in the span of 10 days, at that point, I didn't know what to do with my anger. But then came the sustained and super powerful organizing of the folks, Justice for Black Lives Winnipeg. And after their 7 days of no peace rallies, you know, I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I attended a Winnipeg Police Cause Harm intake within a week of the last rally. So it's pretty fair to say that I owe the work that I do now to Black feminist abolitionists. And I really approach abolitionist work as praxis. So like a way of making real the theoretical work that I did in my master's, and that looks like resisting, you know, the colonial order, and who maintains that, but it's the police.
Definitely sounds like you guys have your mind wrapped around this in such a passionate way, which is really good to hear. And, you know, going for myself, it's definitely something that I like to see within the city, and something that I think is important for our communities to have. Why do you guys think that it's so important to have a group like this in the community that people can depend on?
Yeah, I think that the work that we at least try to do is important, because so much happens like every day, every week when it comes to police violence, abuses, appropriations of budgets, like everything. It just feels like a constant flood, even for us who try to stay fairly on top of things. And so I think it's important for us to exist, even just to kind of collect and try to make sense of some of this, because obviously so many people in the city have the visceral day-to-day experiences of police abuses. And so for us to just like try to bring those together into a collective narrative and, you know, statistics and all these sorts of things, like, which kind of sounds boring, but at the same time, I think it can help, you know, capture the way that these trends develop over time. And especially when it comes to budget season and budget issues, which were like a couple of days away from restarting in the city, I think just really being able to tie police violence as a day-to-day practice to the dollars that are allocated to the police service itself. You know, we often argue, following you know, Black abolitionists like Marianne Cabra and Andrea Ritchie, that policing itself is violence. Like, there's no way to reform violence out of it as an institution. And so that means that every single new dollar that is allocated towards policing means more and more violence. And so I think really trying to capture that and to emphasize that just again and again, that, you know, the politicians at City Council, which just allocated police another $7.3 million because the police didn't sufficiently cut enough from their budget, all of that represents more violence. And so I think it's important for us just to be able to say that these aren't coincidences, and these aren't mistakes. These aren't a case of a few bad apples. And, you know, the saying there is always forgotten, because it's, a bad apple spoils the bunch, that the institution as a whole is complicit and is violent. And so I think for us just to be able to be there in the community and just to continue to repeat this constantly. And I think people do appreciate that kind of work, because as mentioned, it can just be really overwhelming to try to keep up with everything that happens on a daily basis. So I would say that's kind of like why it's important for us to have a place in the community. Of course, the metric for whether that importance is warranted is obviously within the community itself, within the families and, you know, the individuals who are most affected by police violence. So that's something that we continue to try to work on.
I'll just add quickly just about what James was saying about kind of shifting narratives. And I think it's pretty safe to say that in Winnipeg specifically, but I would argue like more broadly, narratives have been shifting since summer 2020 about in challenging this association that we've always had between police and public safety when we actually know how much harm they cause in our communities. And again, in this work, it's important that we collectively understand that a better world exists without the police. And really, from that understanding, we can build that better world.
All right. Not just generally speaking in the community, but specifically within your organization, what kind of barriers do you guys face day-to-day basis?
I'd say probably in the broadest sense, opposing, inherently the work of opposing an institution like the police is dangerous work, especially for BIPOC, as James mentioned. Not everybody is comfortable getting up in front of the mayor or the police chief to say that we want to abolish, their employment right now. So, especially for BIPOC who are already surveilled, criminalized, and brutalized by the police on a regular basis, coming out and being an abolitionist and speaking out against specific things that happen in the city related to police violence is dangerous work. This week, we've only just heard of one instance of a community member who's in touch with us where they felt that the police targeted and intimidated them. They have no prior offenses, but the police showed up in the middle of the night at their house, rang their doorbells and called all their phones. And so, the threat of police surveillance and violence is always there when you speak out publicly against the police. And I guess that is the risk of organizing in this space.
Yeah, and I can just add to it briefly, but we may get into it later, but just a challenge that every organization faces of trying to, recruit and retain, keep momentum going within a global pandemic when people are just so overwhelmed by just trying to survive day-to-day life. We're stretched thin. It takes a lot out of us personally because it's entirely volunteer run as an organization. And so, it's a constant struggle and learning experience to figure out what it means to try to do this for the long haul. Because as much as we would like the Winnipeg Police to be abolished, tomorrow, this will be a multi-year and multi-decade project of struggle. And so as many organizations are working to figure out, what does it mean to be in this for the long haul? How do we prevent things like burnout? And how do we just make sure that everyone feels valued and appreciated for the work that they do, knowing that they could spend it in so many other ways. So that would also just be a more general comment on just the learning process of organizing.
Definitely understandable. For sure makes sense when it comes to, organizations within our city, and especially just such a huge, corporation or establishment as big as the police service. Takes a lot of bravery to be able to go up against. So I commend you guys for doing that. James, you spoke a little bit on the pandemic, and I'm just curious as to how things kind of played out throughout the pandemic. Were they different before? Were things kind of the same? Were there some challenges you guys had to overcome? How has that been?
Rebecca, did you want to start on this one?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I can talk about some of the effects that COVID's had on us. I guess I'm speaking more about outward facing. And so I think what James mentioned about burnout is definitely very important, but I kind of approach it from a different way. So in terms of our outward facing organizing, COVID has really hindered our ability to do the kind of public outreach that we want to be doing in communities. So I mentioned earlier that we had held a Zoom, Know Your Rights workshop earlier this year, but we definitely recognize the significant barriers in holding online only events. So yeah, having our work be online only, we kind of recognize the limitations of that and are very much looking forward to all the things that we want to do and offer our communities that simply can't be done online. So that's kind of exciting, looking into what organizing will look like when we're able to gather in person again. But other than that, really, since a lot of our advocacy and awareness raising mainly happens online, we've been able to maintain a pretty stable presence on our social medias and also at City Hall. So we've been able to go out postering, when COVID restrictions have allowed us to do so. We've still been able to support different online fundraising efforts by families affected by police violence and stuff like that.
Yeah, and things are obviously developing as just the landscape of COVID changes. A few weeks ago, there was the National Gathering for BIPOC Families Against Police Violence in Winnipeg, which brought together families from all over the country to speak out against police violence. And so that was something that we showed up to support. And that was just an example of how organizing by Aisha Hudson's family and a lot of other people can be done in a way that obviously respects COVID restrictions and everything. Everyone was masked, distant, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like congregated outside of police headquarters and then marched to the legislature. So I think there's ways that groups and organizations are figuring out how to kind of get around this. But of course, like the landscape of things are changing all the time. So organizations always have to be quick on our toes, but especially now. So yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Totally understand the challenges that would just inherently be present within an organization like this. How can folks get involved with what y'all are doing? Just connecting through social media, meeting at an organization? What's the best way to do that?
I would say, like, pretty simply, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at WPG Police Harm. And Facebook, you can find us there too. If you're interested in organizing with us or pitching us a blog post, for example, you can DM us on any of those platforms or send us an email at wpgpolicecauseharm@gmail.com.
Yeah, and something neat that people have done before is we have a bunch of posters that have been designed just to provide information about police violence and budgets, which are all available on the website. And so some people have just printed a bunch of those out and then just put them up around their neighborhood, which seems like a small thing, but just given what we talked about before, like knowing how dominant police propaganda is in Winnipeg, even just having like posters visible in the community, I think can be a really powerful thing. So that's another way that people can engage is just putting up those kind of things. We also have Know Your Rights cards, as Rebecca mentioned before. So if anyone wants like some of those, like a stack of those to distribute in their community or with organizations that they're a part of, that's also another way that we can collaborate in that way.
Perfect. So to all of our listeners, please go follow them. If you're interested in getting involved with what they're doing, just shoot them a message. Just, don't be afraid to reach out. And I'm sure that, you'll get things going and rolling right away. One question we like to ask our guests, as most of them are organizations or groups here within the city that are doing good work, we like to ask that, let's say that all barriers were lifted and all barriers were kind of erased as the organization, whether it be funding, having staff, enough people there, what would be your guys' biggest goals sort of for the city of Winnipeg here? What would you guys do with that?
Yeah, so I guess obviously, as we've mentioned, it's our stated goal to defund and abolish the Winnipeg Police Service. So I'll just speak a little bit more abstractly maybe about what this would look like. In a larger sense, we want to show the community that abolition is so much more than just defunding and abolishing the police. Abolition is really abolishing the police and blank. Defunding and abolishing is a means to an end. So abolition is really the creation of healthy and safe communities that are able to hold each other accountable in non-punitive and non-carceral ways. And these are ways that actually reduce harm and offer transformative alternatives for what we actually understand justice to be. So tangibly, this is shifting public funds to new services and new institutions that don't even exist yet. We don't even know what they are yet. It's about shifting funding to education, housing, recreation, harm reduction, accessibility, food security. These are all things that help to create security and safety in a world without police and cages. And so I think, having all these barriers lifted tomorrow, that's kind of the vision of what we're really after.
Yeah, and also like it's it's not something that we would ever be conceited enough to say that we can do on our own. There's so many other amazing organizations in the city that a hypothetical future we would want to partner with in such a collaborative way. So all the things that Rebecca mentioned, but just to zoom in on like the harm reduction angle, things like safe consumption sites and safe supply and overdose prevention sites and Narcan distribution and all these kind of things, just like an incredible amount of resources for people who use drugs and people who are criminalized and stigmatized and ostracized and all that kind of thing, which obviously there's already great organizations doing that kind of work, like the Manitoba Harm Reduction Network and other groups like that. So to be able to collaborate more fully in those kind of things, if and when such barriers were lifted, would be incredible. And that's something that we like to think that we're struggling towards, as hard and overwhelming as it feels a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap up here, is there anything upcoming at all for y'all that you'd want to kind of promote here for a moment? Any events or organizations, anything like that?
Yeah, I'll just flag that, as mentioned, the city budget season's coming up right away. And so the city will propose a budget and then spend like a week or so with like committees and board, hearings and all that kind of boring stuff. But those are places that we're going to try to make various interventions at. So stay tuned for that on social media. And beyond that, as we just like try to get more into the swing of things, we'll have different events coming up. But as for different organizations that we would want to shout out, like as Rebecca mentioned, Justice for Black Lives Winnipeg, Police Free Schools Winnipeg are doing really incredible organizing against school resource officers and are in an ongoing struggle against the L'Oreal School Division to release a report, which actually ended the SRR program. So paying attention to that struggle, I think, is really important. And then the struggles of like Aisha Hudson's family, Justice for Aisha, as well as the other families in Winnipeg who have lost loved ones, just paying attention and supporting the call outs when those happen, I think are all really important.
I might have something to add, but it depends when this will come out.
This will come out a week from today.
Okay, so yeah, I can plug an event that will be happening on Saturday, December 4th. And so it's from 2 to 5 p.m. at XQ's Cafe at 551 Sargent Avenue. So Bar None is hosting a letter writing event for incarcerated folks. So we're inviting community members out to write letters to incarcerated folks over the holidays. And so we're asking folks to RSVP, but that's optional. So please just show up from 2 to 5 at XQ's. We'd love to see you.
That's awesome. It's so great to kind of hear how passionate you guys are about this work. Just the focus and dedication to, put your energy on the line towards this work makes me hopeful and excited for the future of our city. So all of our listeners, please go get involved, look out for their call outs, look out for their events, and make sure you just come down and, even just being a body there means something towards the goals that we're trying to achieve. So another question we like to ask our guests as we end it off is, because this will air on the radio, which song would you like to play after the episode ends?
I would love for you folks to play Fight Like Ida B and Marsha P by Rick Wilson, please.
You got it. I'll get that set up. Thank you both so much for taking the time out of your afternoon to come and speak with us today and let us learn a little bit about what y'all do. Really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for having us. This has been great.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Of course. Yeah, it's been amazing. And, we hope to see you guys within the community and just continue doing the good work you're doing. This has been UMFM 101.5. You're listening to Engage with Kate Jones, Josue DeVee. We were just speaking to James and Rebecca of Winnipeg Police Cause Harm. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please go check out the work they're doing, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.